The character of James Bond has enjoyed a long, colorful, and contentious history, and not just in movies. Many times, the rights to portray a character as James Bond have ended up in a court of law. Sometimes, producers or writers have changed the character just enough to avoid legal action. The character portrayed is still essentially James Bond though. With that in mind, we celebrate this week's world premiere of Skyfall by taking a look at both the best official and unofficial interpretations of James Bond.
10. Matthew Burke. G.I. Joe series. The Bond character is called Matthew Burke. Appropriately, the main villain in the episode is Dr. Mindbender, who bears more than a passing resemblance to the classic Bond villain Blofield. 9. James Bond Jr. James Bond Jr. was an animated series in 1991 to 1992, featuring a main character described as being the nephew of James Bond. Jr. does battle with classic Bond villains such as Dr. No, who is green-skinned, Jaws, and Oddjob. 8. Jimmy. The Bond character here is simply called Jimmy, but is every bit James Bond, right down to the vulture PPK. Jimmy is portrayed as being a cruel, abusive, womanizing, inept louse. 7. George Lazenby. Australian actor George Lazenby was actually the fourth choice to play Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Moore was considered for the role, but he was filming rival franchise The Saint at the time. 6. Peter Sellers. The producers of the 1967 film Casino Royale knew that they had little chance of truly competing with the actual film franchise. So, they chose a different route, making Casino Royale into a satire starring David Niven as an elder Bond, Peter Sellers as the current Bond, and Woody Allen as the evil young Jimmy/Dr. Noah.
5. Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan is technically everything that you would expect in a Bond. He absolutely looks the part, and has all the gadgets, girls, and action that you would expect a Bond to have.
4. Timothy Dalton. If Timothy Dalton had been cast for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the whole Bond franchise might have been healthier overall. Dalton played Bond exactly the way that Fleming wrote the character in his books. 3. Roger Moore. Roger Moore's greatest sin, in the eyes of most Bond fans, is not being Sean Connery. Compared against Connery, most everyone would fall short. Nevertheless, Moore's Bond was the defining Bond for a generation of moviegoers. 2. Daniel Craig. By 2006, audiences were finally ready to accept a Bond closer to what Ian Fleming envisioned. Daniel Craig's Bond does not always come off as a good guy. He's not nearly as refined as Moore, or as cinematic as Brosnan. 1. Sean Connery. Bond, James Bond. Sean Connery did not have a lot of lines in Dr. No, but Connery's greeting helped to draw everything out of what he had. It also helped define the character for moviegoers. To many, there is literally one James Bond to exist, and that is Sean Connery.